For something moving in a circle, only one condition needs to be satisfied. There must be a force that continuously acts at 90 degrees to the object's velocity or direction of motion. That means that its velocity and direction of travel constantly changes, but it still travels at a constant speed. As velocity is a vector, it's still accelerating because the direction of the velocity is changing, even though the magnitude of the velocity, the speed, is not. This centripetal acceleration is equal to v squared over r, where r is the radius of the circle. As F equals ma, the centripetal force is equal to mv squared over r. As speed is equal to distance over time, we can calculate it by doing circumference divided by the time period, so 2 pi r over t. It's also useful to consider its angular velocity, also known as angular speed or angular frequency. That's how many radians of the orbit are covered every second. We give it the symbol omega, a curly w. That's equal to 2 pi f, or 2 pi over t. How many radians per second? That means that v equals omega r. This is actually a very important equation that people often forget. Replacing v in our centripetal acceleration and force equations, we end up with the alternative versions, a equals omega squared r and f equals m omega squared r. If you're given the time period, you use the omega versions and replace the omega with 2 pi over t. If you're given the actual speed though, you use the first equation, a equals v squared over r, or f equals mv squared over r. Similar to angular velocity, angular displacement is just how many radians an object has turned through. If it's a vertical loop, like a loop-the-loop on a roller coaster, the centripetal force will be due to the support force of the track, but we also have to take into account the weight. We might call the support force S. At the bottom, mg is pulling down and S is pushing up. The centripetal force is one minus the other, or at least that's true if we're just thinking about the magnitudes of the forces. It's the resultant of the two forces. At the top, both are pulling down though, meaning the centripetal force now equals S plus mg instead. In both cases, we usually then equate this to mv squared over r. When it's at either side, weight isn't contributing to the centripetal force at all. Therefore, S is just equal to mv squared over r. A car on a banked track or a banking plane can be tricky, but just remember that it's different from a normal mass on a slope situation. The main force here is the perpendicular reaction force of the track, or the upthrust of the plane, which is at an angle. These forces need to, of course, supply a vertical component that is equal to the weight mg. Usually we need to find out what the centripetal force is, which is pointing towards the center of the circular track, or the plane's circular path. Drawing a triangle shows that this horizontal force is equal to mg tan theta, if theta is to the vertical, as we have the opposite and adjacent sides of the triangle. This is then equal to mv squared over r, and you can see that the m's cancel too. Simple harmonic motion describes the motion of any object that is oscillating around a point, like a pendulum or a mass on a spring. There are two conditions. The acceleration must be proportional to the object's displacement from equilibrium, and it must also be in the opposite direction to the displacement. What's true for acceleration is also true for the force, the restoring force, that's trying to get it back to equilibrium. The equation A equals minus omega squared x shows both of these conditions. As we know from circular motion, omega is equal to 2 pi f, well 2 pi over t, and x is the displacement from equilibrium in meters. If we use calculus in A-level physics, we can derive this from the other equation you'll see in a minute. But as we usually don't, we just use this equation as our jumping off point for SHM. In calculations, we're never really concerned with the minus, as we know it's going to change from negative to positive as it oscillates. Maximum acceleration occurs at the maximum displacement, which you know is the amplitude, capital A. So little a max equals omega squared big A. We've just swapped out displacement for amplitude. If you draw a graph to show how displacement changes with time for something undergoing SHM, like a pendulum, we end up with a sine graph. To be clear, it's a sine graph if we start at 0, it's cos if we start at amplitude. Still sinusoidal, just shifted 90 degrees. At any given time, the displacement is equal to a fraction of the amplitude. This fraction is given by sine or cos omega t. Be careful when using S or cos with any periodic motion like circular or SHM, because your calculator must be in radian mode. The full equation for velocity at any point is this. Luckily, it's fairly unlikely you'll have to use this, as more often than not, we're just concerned with the maximum velocity, which has to be at equilibrium. That's where x equals 0. So that means Vmax equals omega a, or 2 pi fa. This is an important equation because it allows us to find the maximum kinetic energy if we use this speed in half mv squared, and the maximum kinetic energy is equal to the total energy of the system. Going back to our graph real quick, this is essentially distance over time. So if you're asked to find the maximum speed from it, you could draw a tangent at equilibrium and you'll get the maximum gradient, which is then equal to the maximum speed. But a far more accurate method is to get the time period and amplitude from the graph, then calculate Vmax equals 2 pi Fa, or 2 pi over t times A. As the object moves away from equilibrium, kinetic energy is turned into potential energy. In the case of a pendulum, that's gravitational potential energy. Be careful with displacement for a pendulum though. The displacement is roughly a straight line from equilibrium to where it is. It's not the vertical height it's moved. That means if you are given the maximum height of a pendulum, the only thing you can do is find out the GPE it has at amplitude, then equate this to the kinetic energy it has at equilibrium to find Vmax. Height is not displacement or amplitude for a pendulum. You can then find out more about the oscillations using Vmax equals 2 pi Fa as before. If there's no damping or resonance and it's a closed system, no energy should be lost to the surroundings, which means the total energy stays the same as kinetic energy and potential energy do their balancing act. For a pendulum, time period is equal to 2 pi root L over G, where L is the length of the string, to be precise, from the pivot to the center of the bob, and G is gravitational field strength. Note there's no mass in this. It doesn't affect the time period, or therefore the frequency either. For a spring, T equals 2 pi root M over K, where K is the spring constant, M is the mass. These equations often crop up in proportionality multiple choice questions. For example, what would happen to the frequency of a pendulum if you doubled the length? Well, the time period would go up by a factor of root 2, which means the frequency would do the opposite. The pendulum equation is a slight approximation though, as it assumes the motion is along a straight line, which is why if we measure the time for 10 oscillations in an experiment and divide by 10 to get an accurate time period, for example, we must use a small angle, say less than 10 degrees. Use a large angle and the model breaks down. A pendulum's motion isn't circular motion, apart from when it passes through equilibrium. It is that for a brief moment. This allows us to use Vmax from SHM and use it in our circular motion equation, F equals mv squared over r. And that gives us a centripetal force, which is going to be the tension in the string minus the weight, again, if we're thinking about magnitudes. In reality, there are resistive forces like air resistance that oppose the motion of the object moving. It always acts in the opposite direction to the velocity. We call this a damping force. It removes energy from the system. If we draw what happens to oscillations over time, we can see that the amplitude decreases gradually. This is what we call light damping. Sometimes you'll see a line that joins the peaks together, which shows us exactly how the amplitude is changing over time. You could be asked to state how much energy is left at a certain time. In that case, just remember that Vmax is proportional to the amplitude and energy is proportional to V squared. So that means the energy of the system is proportional to amplitude squared. So if the amplitude is halved, that means the energy will have quartered. If the resistive force is a lot larger, the object won't even get a chance to oscillate. Its displacement will just gradually decrease. This is like if you grab someone on a swing to let them down slowly. We call this heavy damping or over damping. Critical damping is when the damping force is applied just as the object reaches equilibrium, ensuring that it comes to a stop at equilibrium as quickly as possible. This would be like you grabbing somebody on a swing as they reach the bottom. Shock absorbers in car suspension are designed to do this as much as possible. So when the wheels move upward when going over a bump, they go straight back down to where they're supposed to be, so the car is affected as little as possible. Resonance is the opposite, is when an external force is driving the oscillations, increasing the amplitude, adding energy into the system. But we do have to add the caveat that this only happens when a system is lightly damped. Maximum resonance occurs when the frequency of the driving force, the driving oscillations, matches that of the natural or resonant frequency of the system. That's the frequency it would oscillate at without the driving force. The driving force frequency can also be a multiple of the natural frequency, and you'll still get substantial resonance. The driving force and the restoring force are 90 degrees out of phase with each other, which means the driving force pushes most when the object is at equilibrium, much like the wheel under a swinging pirate ship ride, pushing it higher and higher every swing. If you draw a graph of amplitude against driving frequency F, we get the highest amplitude, the most resonance, when it's equal to the natural or resonant frequency F0, as we know. If you add more damping, though, the height of that peak decreases as you reduce the effect of resonance. Note that the peak does not get any narrower, though. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did. And don't forget to check out our revision app to help you test your knowledge. And I'll see you next time.